arrive.
Okay. There have been instances of the police fining people, so that does happen. Perhaps not as much as you think should.
People are required to quarantine. They have no system. The police admit this themselves. They cannot enforce a quarantine.
Okay. You said you're putting on more flights in December. What about all those people who had flights booked with Ryanair in November, and then it turned out that under the terms of the lockdown, foreign travel was not allowed? If they were booked on a flight which did take off, you chose not to refund them?
We were very straightforward. We said there are no refunds. If the flight is operating, there's no refunds. But every single one of those passengers was given the right to move their booking to a later date. So we don't do refunds, but we did allow all those passengers in November to avail of a free move prior to departure if they didn't want to travel. Once the vaccines arrive, and it looks like they'll arrive in the first quarter of next year, there will be a huge snapback and surge in travel. It's one of the things people have missed most as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
But it meant in November, didn't it? There were lots of your flights with hardly anyone on them.
And there were lots of flights with people on them. Yes, our load factor in November will be probably down or somewhere in about the mid 60%. And lots of people did avail of the free move facility that we gave everybody if they didn't want to travel because of government advice in November.
What are your thoughts on the vaccine, given that Qantas is saying that it's looking at changing its terms and conditions so people would be required to have a vaccination before getting on a plane? Can you imagine doing that? What do you think of it?
No, I think Qantas is specifically talking about long-haul 12 and 14-hour flights, which are entirely different. They're not talking about that for their domestic Australian flights, for example. We don't think it will apply. Certainly the vaccines are coming, and they are coming faster than anybody had previously predicted. We think there will be widespread vaccine availability, particularly to the high-risk groups, elderly people, people who work in the health services, by about Easter of next year. We think vaccine will remove the abilities of governments, certainly in Europe, to lock people down. It removes the risks of the health service being overrun, and we think it will create, certainly by the summer of 2021, a return to families travelling on much needed holidays, certainly within short haul, within Europe. I think it will take longer for people to have confidence in long haul flights, 12 and 14-hour flights, but you will not require vaccine certificates to travel on short haul flights between Ireland and the UK, or between the UK and Spain or Portugal or Greece next year.
Michael O'Leary, Chief Executive of Ryanair, thank you.
3 minutes to 8, time for the weather. Here is Susan Powell.
A very good morning to you. We're off to a greyer start to the day today than yesterday, where there was a lot of sunshine first thing. But yesterday it was also quite chilly. Outside now it is relatively mild. Many areas already seeing temperatures in double figures. That cloud, though, is going to stick around for many of us through the day today. For the southeast of England, eastern England, the Midlands and the northeast of England, we should get away, though, with a dry day despite the cloud. After some brighter spells, perhaps the southeast of England or East Anglia will be the places to be. Top temperatures 11 to 13, so considerably warmer than yesterday, particularly for northeastern counties. For the southwest of England...
I love cats!
Yes, Tom.
I also have Tourette syndrome.
Tanya Lee Davis.
I am 3'5" tall. I've always considered myself, really down to earth.
Don Biswas.
I live with my overbearing Indian mother, so I've been in lockdown for 37 years.
National travellers reacting perhaps to what we've just heard from Michael O'Leary. Also, after 8:30, we're going to be putting your questions about the new coronavirus vaccine to experts.
You're listening to Today on BBC Radio 4. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 24th of November. The headlines this morning. Donald Trump has agreed that the process of transferring power to US President-elect Joe Biden must go ahead, but says he will continue fighting to stay in office. From next month, international travellers arriving in England will need to quarantine for just 5 days if they test negative for coronavirus. And talks will continue today to agree a UK-wide plan for families to gather at Christmas. The BBC News is read by Susan Ray.
More than 2 weeks after being declared on SOPO reports.
There's been no concession, no hoisting of a white flag, no phone call to Joe Biden congratulating him on his victory. But Donald Trump, via tweet last night, came as close as maybe he will to accepting that he's lost, that he's a loser in this election. He confirmed that he'd instructed the head of a normally obscure government department, the General Services Administration, to do what needs to be done. It's this agency that facilitates the transition, giving office space and paying the salaries of key Biden officials to prepare for taking the reins of power on January the 20th. For over 2 weeks, there's been a stubborn refusal to allow this process to get underway. But with the state of Michigan certifying Joe Biden's victory,
they have to isolate for 2 weeks when they arrive in England, will soon be able to pay for a coronavirus test and leave quarantine after 5 days if they test negative. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, said the new system would allow people to see loved ones and boost international business. The travel industry has been devastated by the pandemic, and firms have long been campaigning for changes to the quarantine rules. Here's our transport reporter, Simon Browning.
From the middle of December, when they arrive in England, travellers will head home to isolate as before. But after 5 days, they will now be able to take a coronavirus test. If that result comes back negative, they are released from quarantine. The cost of the test will be paid for by the passenger and be carried out by a private company, so there is no burden on the NHS. Private tests are currently around £100 per person, and for a family of 4 wanting some winter sun, the cost could...
System in place in Europe where passengers take a test before they fly.
We think that's a much better system. It means that people who pay for their own tests, at least when they arrive in the country, they are COVID-free. Because they've had the test within 72 hours of departure, that would be a better system. You're now only allowing people into the country who have tested negative, not letting them in for 5 days and then only testing them after that time.
The 4 nations of the UK are still discussing the exact details of the rules which will allow some mixing of households at Christmas. There's been agreement in principle on the importance of
practical concerns rather than political conflict. The length of any relaxation and the impact this would have on public transport has been an issue. And while the aim is to allow more family members to meet, with different rules in place in the different nations of the UK, there's even been a debate over what constitutes a household. Overall, the tone has been cautious, with the Prime Minister characterising this Christmas as a season to be jolly careful.
Sweden, which has been one of only a few Western nations to avoid a lockdown, has introduced stricter measures. A ban on public events of more than 8 people has now come into force. The country has reported a sharp increase in cases and deaths.
Government to miss the target of spending 0.7% of national income on aid. But there's a growing belief at Westminster that announcing its intention to breach the target in advance could be vulnerable to legal challenge, hence the need for new legislation. The problem for government is that opens up the aid cuts to potentially lengthy parliamentary battles.
A quarter of the 585 minority ethnic students questioned by the panel said they'd experienced racial harassment since starting their course, but 2/3 of them hadn't reported it. The guidelines highlight a lack of diversity amongst senior university management, lower average attainment levels of BAME students, and the ethnicity pay gap amongst staff.
A committee of MPs says new building safety laws won't assist homeowners facing huge bills for work ordered in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire. The Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee has called for more help for leaseholders. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Tom Simons.
The Building Safety Bill is designed to ensure a disaster like Grenfell never happens.
To retrieve rock samples from the moon. If successful, its spacecraft should return to Earth in the middle of next month. It's more than 40 years since the Americans and the Soviets brought home lunar rock and do this. The BBC has revealed its list of 100 inspirational and influential women from around the world for 2020. This year, 100 Women is highlighting those who are leading change and making a difference in tackling the coronavirus pandemic, such as Sarah Gilbert, who heads the Oxford University research into a COVID vaccine. The list also features politicians, cultural figures and sportswomen. Here's Nuala McGovern.
This year's list reflects the women who are leading us through these turbulent times. Sanna Marine is...